welcome to another edition of Carnivore Bites. Happy 2023, as 2022 is put in the history books. Your host, Jeff Sherman, along with Dr. Eric Lopkin. And Dr. Lopkin, I think we'd be remiss if we didn't discuss biggest winners and losers of 2022. We'll start with you, Dr. Lopkin.
Yeah, I think, looking forward to 2023, I heard a great quote. I wish I could remember who said it, but they were talking about for 2023 to be the best year of the last four, all it has to do is be a little below average.
Yeah,
This is
pretty
how,
much, yes.
yeah, this is
Yeah,
how
the bar's
bad the
pretty
years.
low, yes.
Yes. So, I mean, winners and losers, I don't know that there were too many winners, quite frankly. I
I
think
would not argue with that.
we
But there were some losers. I know one
there
offhand, but
were
we'll
there
let
were
you
a
lead.
there were a lot of losers. I'm going to say one of the biggest losers, or group of people who were one of the biggest losers, were the citizens of Pennsylvania, who had two massive losers running for the Senate, Tweedledum and Tweedledummer, and they didn't have a good option to vote for.
I agree with that. They're definitely, what is we call the 2022's biggest losers just on numbers alone. But yeah, I wasn't enamored with Dr. Oz. It's again maybe relating to another biggest loser of 2022. But essentially, when you got someone that at least has brain waves, maybe a good idea to run with that. What do you think, Dr. Lopkin?
Yeah, again, neither Oz nor Fetterman really convinced people that they had brainwaves, and that was the big problem.
That was a
When you,
big problem, but the Republicans already had that sewed up until you know who interfered with because it's like me, like me, like me, please like me. Uh, inserted Dr. Oz into the mix with his endorsement. This could
and
have been signed, sealed, and delivered.
and that brings up one of the other biggest losers of 2022 was Donald Trump.
I give him the award as the biggest loser. Um, yes, I think the wind is going out of that sail. I think the midterms, before the midterms, you're talking about January 6th, some of the behaviors, it was an insurrection that's completely, obviously, more than debatable, but it wasn't the best, if you will, judgmental. Didn't exude great positive judgment, and then from then on, it just got worse and worse and worse. He screwed up the midterms for the Republicans. Herschel Walker, Dr. Oz, you name. I mean, even the gubernatorial race in Pennsylvania, he had some nutcase that certainly didn't help Dr. Oz, and a big drag on the whole party. I think where does this go though? That's the important thing. Is it is he damaged enough to fade into the sunset, or is this thing going to rise out of the phoenix? I think it might rise out of the phoenix. The question is, does it have enough energy left? That's the question for Dr. Lopkin.
Yeah, I don't think he's going to be able to rise like a phoenix. He might be able to rise like a zombie, but he's still the walking dead. There's nothing he can do about it at this point. And in fact, his weakness is now showing in Congress because as McCarthy struggles to get enough votes to be speaker, Trump has actually come out and told the conservatives, you need to back McCarthy, and they're ignoring him.
Well done, Dr. Lopkin. Yes, that would have been a year ago enough to push McCarthy over the hump. Do you agree with that?
A year ago, it would have, but not now.
A year's a long time, isn't it? Yes. I will also throw into the mix. So we got Pennsylvania. Totally agree with that. Donald Trump. I don't think he will ever recover. What happens after that is food for thought and certainly discussion points for carnivore bites. I think another biggest loser is AOC.
Yeah, AOC lost a lot of credibility. Her own constituents have been turning against her, not enough to get her out of office, but I think in 2 years, uh, the pressure may build and they may be able to primary her. I don't think a Republican will ever take that seat, but it's certainly going to be enough for a Democratic candidate to win a primary against her. And in fact, she's going into 2023 sort of hobbled because in this massive spending bill that was just passed to keep the government going, it was included a clause that TikTok cannot be on any government phone. Government employees are now forbidden to use TikTok. And it looks like they may be on track to ban TikTok at least for every government official, including elected officials. Without TikTok, she loses a massive platform.
No doubt. In fact, I love a commentary I heard. Can't attribute it to the right person, unfortunately, but basically, she's a TikTok celeb, which just happens to be a congressperson. I think it's about pretty much the most accurate summation.
It is. And I think she loses that audience. She's losing her Twitter audience thanks to Elon Musk. She never had much of a following on Instagram. Instagram was just sort of secondary to her. So she's going to have to rebuild her entire social media empire.
No question. I think two other biggest losers, and before we move on, is Stacey Abrams and Beto O'Rourke. Have they finally been put to bed?
I think they have. Stacey Abrams has been shown to be the fraud that we always knew she was.
Hmm.
Not only did she lose her bid for governor of Georgia, but now she's being investigated for campaign finance violations. People who worked on her campaign have come out saying, no, she spent recklessly. She had no clue what she was doing. She's done. Beto O'Rourke, he may be able to salvage his reputation in the private sector, but his political days are over.
Perfect summation. Yes. Stacy, check please. Beto could maybe have some stupid talk show. Well, actually, possibly on CNN, considering that they've lost a third of their viewers in 2022. Job well done, in spite of it being an election year. Maybe he can get a spot on that sinking ship. What do you think? First
Yeah,
comment
I
on
mean that
losing a third of viewers. That's pretty significant. Hello.
that's pretty massive, and I don't think a network has done that since NBC did it when Jeff Zucker was running NBC. So really shouldn't surprise us, but that also puts CNN in the category of biggest loser for 2022.
Yes, I think they certainly do qualify. Did not have them on the initial list, but certainly they can join the esteemed group. Any other biggest losers?
I think those are the biggest. I mean, again, as I said before, there weren't any winners in 2022. Both the Democrats and the Republicans came out looking like they were completely incompetent and
Well, let me
quite.
throw in one thing. How about Hunter Biden? Could he go in that group? I mean, if the Republicans actually get a speaker, he's going to be on the hot seat.
He'll be on the hot seat. I think Hunter Biden is a perpetual biggest loser at
There
this
you go.
point because I mean let's look, even if he's not investigated, we already know, he's a porn addict, he's a drug addict, he's a
Other than that, how'd
criminal,
you
he's
like to play, Mrs. Lincoln?
exactly. I mean, this is somebody who was always a loser, and now we're just finding out just how big a loser.
Good. So he's our perpetual, like
Yeah.
the Washington Post give perpetual Pinocchios to our esteemed president. He'll get the perpetual loser award from Carnivore. Correct?
Yes,
Uh,
absolutely.
well, and also just a little more maybe fuel on the fire in the Trump sinking ship Titanic. Tax returns. Do they? They're not going to help them. Does it put any more torpedoes in that ship, or at this point, who really cares?
Honestly, I think his tax returns were completely irrelevant. The general public doesn't care. It was all about Democrats being able to go, look, he's not a good businessman. Look, but every business person knows the taxes don't represent what actually happens because you're taking deductions, you're moving things around, you're doing your best not to show income on a tax return. So, I mean, this is how business is done. Every person in the country tries to take as many deductions and limit their income on that tax return. Trump did the same thing. So it was pretty irrelevant.
Yeah, but Trump didn't handle it well either. I mean, hello, duh, 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 duh.
No,
What
well,
has he hung?
well,
Instead
he
of
hasn't
instead
handled
in
anything well.
exactly. Instead of just being honest, which I don't know if he's capable of, just say no. They're my own tax returns. There's no law that says I have to release them. I'm not going. Instead of creating all this bullshit that once the audit is done, he doesn't know how to get out of his own way. No one really gives a shit about your tax return except for crazy Democrats. Just tell the truth. No, I am a very successful businessman, business person. These are my own personal documents. It is not in the Constitution, not in the law for me to release it. And guess what? I'm not because I'm not going to feed the swamp. There you go. Jeff Sherman thought of that. He couldn't think of that.
He apparently not. Again, he can't get out of the way of his own ego. We've said that over and over again.
True.
It's
Again,
all
looking at
about him, and looking at losers of 2022. Another one just popped into my head that we should talk about. The Walt Disney Company
yes,
in
their
the
worst year ever.
in the category of go woke and go broke. Walt Disney Company lost 44% of its stock value. And it's primarily because of their woke agenda, fighting with the state of Florida and releasing woke movies that nobody wanted to see.
But it's also, to me, it's fascinating from a marketing perspective. It shows that out of touch elitists, you know, lose sight of what their job is, what their responsibility is, and also losing sight of who their audience is. The most Disney customers go to theme parks, go to movies with children, with young kids to for escapism. It's been that way.
Yes.
Again, Jeffrey Sherman knows this. Why doesn't the leadership? Duh. They don't. They don't want to be reminded of all the crap that's going on in the world. They don't want their noses rubbed in it. They want to have, Billy the dinosaur, hangs out with a Siamese cat, and that's great because I loved it when I was a kid, and that's what kids always like is fun stuff, and it was a great escape for parents. Now parents have to explain themselves, and guess what? After a whole hard days of work or week of work, you don't want to sit down with your kids and have to have a whole new issue at the dining room table. It was supposed to be something that helps smooth that over. Am I not correct?
That's absolutely right. And they really shot themselves in the foot because it wasn't that long ago that Disney realized that the entire company was focused on girls. They had Disney princesses. Their whole success was based on the little girl audience. And they decided they needed to go after the boys' audience. So, what did they do to go after the audience? They bought Marvel Comics, they bought Star Wars, and these were supposed to be their boys' products. And instead, they're replacing all of the male characters with females. They're going out of their way to make these things woke. And the boys that wanted to see this stuff are now turning off.
Exactly. And they didn't even understand, I think most girls who went to like the idea of a male hero. There's nothing wrong with that. It's been going on for 50 years with Marvel.
It has, and again, they are a victim of the go woke and go broke problem, and they didn't get out of their own way. They recently got rid of their CEO. They brought back Bob Iger, And instead of righting the ship, Bob Iger has recently doubled down on their woke agenda. So they're going to keep losing. So they were a big loser in 2022, and if they don't right the ship, they'll be a big loser in 2023.
And maybe nothing is in stone. U.S. Steel was once the biggest corporation in America. Don't kid yourself. You screw up long enough. I don't care if you're. There's nothing called invincibility. Is my only point. So you better watch.
Absolutely right.
And speaking of wokeism, this is something you've researched. Is it Thomas
Tom,
Jefferson High School in Virginia?
Thomas Jefferson High School in Virginia
Speaking of
recently,
wokeism,
yes, recently withheld the information from a number of their best students that they were eligible for National Merit Scholarships. Now, the National Merit Scholarships have been around for decades. They recognize excellence in the classroom. This makes a big difference when you're applying to colleges. If you have a National Merit Scholarship,
yeah, I would say
you
so.
can
Yeah,
you
yeah.
can afford, college easier. And Thomas Jefferson High School withheld the information that the students had won or were eligible for this scholarship because they wanted equity. They decided they didn't want the students that didn't earn these scholarships to feel bad. So they kept it quiet until it was too late for the students to do anything
Could there
about
be
it.
a lawsuit there?
There,
I
I'm
mean, if you're thinking about
guarantee
what I'm just thinking this through. I mean, it doesn't take a genius to figure it out either. Is you get the merit scholarship, you have financial scholarships from universities and major universities, and if that's now not in the cards, and you're just a average family, that's huge. They open themselves up to lawsuits, I believe.
yeah, this has affected so far, according to the parents that are up in arms about this, 1,200 students. So, yes, can practically guarantee there will be a lawsuit in this school's future.
And I would have to assume also some well-deserved firings.
I would certainly hope so. I know Governor Youngkin is
Oh,
also up in
he's
arms.
not going to let that
He's
slide. There's no
he's
way.
he's not letting that slide. And this was actually pointed out by Dana Perino on Fox News that when Governor Youngkin was campaigning, every time he mentioned that he was going to make sure educational standards stayed high, that they were teaching advanced math to all of their students, he was greeted by standing ovations. The parents want the education standards to go back up. This is absolutely ridiculous that you're penalizing kids that worked and studied
Yeah, but it
so that
also goes to the biggest losers, the Republican Party. I'm not putting them in that category, but they had the ball, like to use a football analogy, the ball was right there on the kickoff. They could have ran it in for. These are one of the was one of the hot button issues. But again, I think the Trump fatigue and other screw ups snatched what victory from the jaw, or snatched
that's defeat from the
defeat from the
jaws of
jaws of
victory.
victory. Correct or not?
Yes, that's absolutely correct.
Well, not very promising. And speaking of the Republicans screwing things over, screwing things up, McCarthy, okay, not his biggest fan, but not bad. And you have Matt Gaetz and others basically putting the monkey wrench in his nomination for Speaker. Karl Rove called it a unmitigated disaster if it does occur, and Carvel called it political suicide for the Republicans. Your thoughts? Question number one: does he get it in the end? I'm leaning towards he squeaks it out, uh, and if he doesn't, is it political suicide or a fiasco?
I think he will squeak it out. This is an abject disaster for the Republicans because they stepped into Congress in the majority and immediately proved to the country that they cannot govern. This is what they've done. And quite frankly, the Democrats are no better because the reason the conservatives are fighting Kevin McCarthy is because McCarthy was willing to negotiate with the Democrats. Well, guess what? There were only about 20 Republicans out of the 218 that were causing this problem. You're telling me that 20 moderate Democrats couldn't have stepped up and said, no, we are going to work across the aisle. McCarthy has shown he's willing to work with us. We are going to do what's best for America and move forward. But neither party is willing to put the voters first, the people of America's first. They're all about their own power. And this is a shame of both parties.
100% agree. There's no question, but the only comment I would say on that is when your adversary is destroying themselves, let it happen. So
See,
also
but
on
that's part of the problem is that the Republicans and the Democrats need to stop looking at each other as adversaries. They are all there for the same purpose, to serve the American people, and both parties are failing miserably. And who's going to be the biggest loser in this fight? The American people, because not only are the Republicans screwing themselves up now, they could very well, depending on how long this goes on, hand the White House back to Joe Biden in 2024 because the Republicans have just shown the American people they're not capable of running the government.
and they're also, basically a group of crazies led by, not in total but in part by people like Matt Gates. As far as I remember, wasn't he under the hot lights for something to do with underaged women? Like, really?
I don't remember what his difficulty was, but he, of all people, should not be fighting Kevin McCarthy because McCarthy, as the minority leader and as the chief fundraiser during the elections, he practically gave Gets his seat.
Well, I think there was a lot of controversy with Gates, with Gats, and I think that it had some very nefarious underpinnings. Um, has been also talk in the political arena that Biden there is dumping Harris. I don't know if that has any legs, no pun intended, but I don't know. Would he? Is it in his best interest to dump Harris, or there'll be too much of a backlash? I think there's too much of a backlash.
I think she has made such a fool of herself that he could do it without too much of a backlash because all you have to do is run the Harris blooper reel of her speeches and go, this is why we're getting rid of her. He can turn to the border crisis. He appointed her border czar, and the problem has gotten worse under her leadership.
There
So
isn't. Wait,
there
wait,
are
wait. I have to
more.
pick something. There is no such thing as her leadership. That's an oxymoron.
Well, yes.
She's incapable. Everything in her life is handed to her because she checked the right boxes. Let's just call a situation a situation.
Yeah, so I think he could manage to get rid of her. Depends on who he's going to replace her with. Um, I I think it's going to be very difficult for the radical left to get somebody to replace her because I don't think the centrists in the party want to put up with this anymore. And Harris has shown herself to be so incompetent. And let's face it, it's not unprecedented for a president to replace a vice president. Look at Spiro Agnew.
No, no question about it, although he was under indictment. But it's not unprecedented. And you're right. All you have to do is run the highlight reels, and sometimes I think, wow, I wish I smoked pot still, because wow, I to get high and to listen to some of her word salads are hysterical. When you're straight, if you were high, I think you'd have to go to like a hospital. The dream of a day with electric buses. Yeah, that's what I do every night before I go to bed is imagine a world with electric. But yeah, she could she could go without too much problem. Um, and this day in history, Lyndon Baines Johnson introduced in his State of the Union the Great Society of 1965 in 1965 again proved to be an abject failure, especially for certain minority groups, especially for blacks. Pretty much dismantled the family structure of African Americans. Great job, Lyndon.
Yeah, the family structure for African Americans was so much better at that point. I'm not going to say things were better for African
No,
Americans at
not
that
no,
point, but
no, definitely not.
you know,
No, but I
but
think no, I
the
think your
family
point is well.
structure,
But your point is
the
well
family
taken
stru-
because let me. I'm sorry, doesn't mean to interrupt for a second. That yes, back then, blacks, African Americans faced huge racial barriers, huge prejudicial backlashes, but yet, believe it or not, they had more intact families. All the things that you could say, wow, to put them, position them to position for success. 60 years later, not the case. Correct?
it's not the case, and I do have to say that the problem is being tackled, of course, not by liberals and not by the government, but I happen to know of a nonprofit called ABBA that is starting up, that their entire focus is to help support fath- fathers of African American families to create that family unit and build generational support. So the African American community has has figured out that this is a major problem and they are taking care of it without any help from the liberals or the government.
Oh no, the liberals will push against that, but that's another issue entirely. We always talk a lot about liberals, and it's always do as I say, not as I do. Leonardo DiCaprio, a big outspoken celebrity on the dangers of global warming, basically spotted, no surprise there, he's taking jets to events, but on a huge yacht with him and just his harem of hot chicks. If you really need a yacht that
Yeah,
big for this? And do you really
DiCaprio
give
was
a
a
shit
huge
like you say?
DiCaprio is a huge hypocrite when it comes to the environment. He has gone to many climate conferences in his private jet. His carbon footprint is probably bigger than most towns.
Yes.
It is absolutely ridiculous. And again, what he's doing, what the Great Society, it all goes to show that these liberal plans don't work. And that's the problem, is they have these theories, and I mean, take a look at what happened with Obamacare. Healthcare is more expensive now than it was before Obamacare. The whole thing was supposed to lower the cost of healthcare. The Great Society was going to lift African Americans out of poverty, and it was an abject failure. These programs don't work because they don't consider the consequences.
And they don't connect to reality. They're all
Yes,
Ivy League, Washington Belt, big think tank nonsense that has no connection with reality. They're great in a
exactly.
textbook,
And
amazingly great in a
it
textbook.
yes, it happens over and over, and yet they still keep doing the same thing. Which, let's quote Albert Einstein: the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result.
You are correct. To finish up on a lighter note, the Israeli government is working on possibly a joint venture with NASA on putting up solar power panels and infrastructure on the moon. Pretty
Yeah,
interesting.
this is a project not just to generate energy, but hopefully to create the first moon base, which, of course, energy is a big problem when you're isolated on the moon. Solar panels are a great solution for that. Working with Israel, Israel has the capability of building these solar panels, which would mean we're not getting the solar panels from China, which is an additional benefit. So this could be massive. We know that NASA is planning to return to the moon. They've been spurred on by SpaceX. With the Israeli government working with us, it becomes more of an international effort. And quite frankly, we should get a couple of other nations in with us because China
like
is
India.
trying to get to the moon.
No question
China's
about it. My
trying to
only
get to the
question,
moon right now, and we need to get back there before they can set up anything.
no question about that. But another question for you, Dr. Lockman, is does AOC and the squad cry if that joint collaboration ever happens? Do we think she'll
The,
break down in the House floor?
I'm sure that she breaks down at the mention of the word Israel. Um, and the squad has perpetuated so much anti-Israel sentiment and so much anti-Semitism, which, by the way, was on the rise in 2022, thanks to the efforts of the squad. Uh, they need to be censured for their anti-Semitic comments, and they need to be stopped.
Couldn't agree more. Great. Reflecting back on 2022, I wouldn't put Carnivore Bites into the loser category. I think we might have been one of the few winners, Dr. Lockman. We had a good year.
We did have a good year. Lord knows we had enough to talk about. There was
No
never
doubt.
a week where we go, nothing happened. But yes, we've been picking up listeners, we've been picking up platforms. So things went very well for Carnivore in 2022, and I expect better things in 2023.
And thank you, Dr. Lopkin. And it was a pleasure working with you in 2022. And I look forward to 23.
Same here. And of course, we want to hear from our listeners in 2023. So go to exvadio.com/connect. That's exvadio.com/connect. Let us know what issues you're concerned about. Let us know your opinions. We want to hear from you. And of course, you can catch every episode of Carnivore Bites at exvadio.com/podcasts, the Carnivore Radio website, the Apple Podcasts app, Google Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, Amazon Music, Audible, and other platforms that respect freedom of speech. And with any luck, we've got a couple of surprises coming up in 2023 that we're looking forward to.
Thank you, Dr. Lopkin, and thank our listeners. We'll be back next week.
We'll see you then.